What happens when two sworn rivals are forced to work together on the most ambitious project of their lives? For Victor Hale and Elena Rivera, love was the last thing they expected. But as their fiery clashes turned into late-night conversations and stolen glances, they discovered that sometimes the greatest love stories are born from the unlikeliest of beginnings. The sleek conference room on the 50th floor of Hale Innovations headquarters buzzed with tension. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, but no one was admiring the view. All eyes were fixed on the thick contract lying on the polished mahogany table. Victor Hale, the 32-year-old CEO of Hale Innovations, sat at one end, his steel-gray eyes focused intently on the document before him. His perfectly tailored black suit and commanding presence reflected years of leading one of the world's most innovative AI and robotics companies. Across from him, Elena Rivera, the 28-year-old heir to Rivera Industries, maintained an equally composed demeanor, though her clenched jaw betrayed her inner turmoil. "Shall we proceed with the signing?" Victor's father, James Hale, broke the silence, his voice carrying the weight of decades of corporate warfare with the Riveras. The contract was unprecedented, a one-year mandatory collaboration between Victor and Elena, disguised as a marriage of convenience, to secure the government's Utopia 2050 project, a $50 billion smart city development that could revolutionize urban living. Elena picked up the pen, her dark eyes scanning the key terms one last time. 1. Mandatory cohabitation for 1 year. 2. Joint decision-making on all project matters. 3. Maintenance of a convincing public image. 4. No emotional involvement. 5. Breach of contract results in immediate project disqualification. "This is nothing but a business arrangement," Victor stated coldly, his voice carrying across the room. "Let's not pretend it's anything more." Elena's lips curved into a sharp smile. "Don't worry, Mr. Hale. I have no interest in anything beyond securing this project for my company." As they signed their names, the tension in the room thickened. Both families watched with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The Rivera-Hale alliance was now official, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Victor's assistant announced. "We'll need both of you to appear." "I know how to handle the media," Elena cut in, rising from her chair. Her emerald green dress caught the afternoon light, matching the determination in her eyes. "I've been doing it since before your company even considered AI development." Victor's jaw tightened at the jab. "Just don't forget, Miss Rivera, that while you may be used to handling traditional infrastructure projects, Utopia 250 is primarily a technological endeavor. Your company's conventional approach might need some updating, and your company's cold, mechanical solutions might need some human touch," Elena retorted, gathering her documents. "But I suppose that's why we're stuck with each other, isn't it?" As both families filed out of the conference room, Victor and Elena remained behind, momentarily alone. The city sprawled below them, a testament to the empire their families had built and the future they were now forced to shape together. "I hope you understand," Victor said quietly, "that this arrangement doesn't change anything between our families." Elena turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "On the contrary, Mr. Hale, it changes everything. The question is, are you ready for what comes next?" Without waiting for his response, she walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Victor watched her leave, his expression hardening. This was more than just a contract. It was the beginning of a power play that would either unite their empires or destroy them both. The sun began to set over the city, casting long shadows across the conference room. The signed contract lay on the table, its pages containing not just terms and conditions, but the fate of 2 dynasties and a future city that could change the world. Neither Victor nor Elena could have known that this forced collaboration would lead them down a path neither had expected, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about business, family, and most importantly, themselves. The rivalry between the Hale and Rivera families was the stuff of corporate legend. For decades, their names had been synonymous with power, innovation, and relentless competition. To understand why Victor Hale and Elena Rivera were now bound by a contract neither of them wanted, one had to look back at the history that shaped their families. The Hale family had built their empire on the cutting edge of technology. Hale Innovations, founded by Victor's grandfather, was a pioneer in artificial intelligence and robotics. From self-driving cars to advanced medical AI, the company had revolutionized industries and cemented its place as a global leader. Victor, inheriting the company at just 28 after his father stepped down, had only expanded its reach. Under his leadership, Hale Innovations had become a juggernaut, dominating the tech world with its futuristic vision. The Rivera family, on the other hand, had a legacy rooted in infrastructure and urban development. Rivera Industries, founded over 70 years ago, was responsible for some of the most iconic cityscapes in the world. From towering skyscrapers to sprawling transportation networks, their projects were a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Elena's father, Carlos Rivera, had modernized the company, steering it towards sustainable and smart infrastructure. Elena, as his only child, had grown up in construction sites and boardrooms, learning the business from the ground up. By the time she was 25, she was already leading major projects, earning a reputation as a bold and innovative leader. But the two families had never seen eye to eye. Their rivalry began decades ago when Hale Innovations outbid Rivera Industries for a government contract to develop AI-driven urban planning systems. The Riveras had accused the Hales of undercutting them with unethical tactics, while the Hales dismissed the Riveras as outdated and resistant to change. The feud only escalated over the years, with each family taking every opportunity to outmaneuver the other. Victor and Elena had grown up in the shadow of this animosity. As children, they had occasionally crossed paths at industry events, but their interactions were always brief and frosty. Victor, with his sharp intellect and reserved demeanor, had little patience for Elena's outspoken confidence. Elena, in turn, found Victor's cold, calculating nature insufferable. To her, he was the embodiment of everything wrong with the tech world, detached, arrogant, and dismissive of the human element. Their rivalry came to a head 3 years ago, when both companies competed for a massive international project to develop a smart city in Dubai. Hale Innovations had proposed a fully automated, AI-driven design, while Rivera Industries emphasized sustainability and community-focused development. In the end, the contract went to a third party, but the bitter battle left both families more divided than ever. Now the stakes were higher than ever. The Utopia 2050 project wasn't just another contract, it was the future. A fully integrated smart city, powered by AI and designed for sustainability, it promised to set a new standard for urban living. The government had made it clear, only a partnership between Hale Innovations and Rivera Industries could bring the project to life. Separately, neither company had the resources or expertise to meet the ambitious requirements. Together, they were unstoppable, at least on paper. For Victor, the partnership was a necessary evil. He had no interest in working with the Riveras, but he couldn't afford to let his pride jeopardize the project. Hale Innovations needed this win to solidify its dominance in the tech world. For Elena, the stakes were just as high. Rivera Industries had been struggling to adapt to the rapidly changing landscape of smart technology. This project was her chance to prove that her family's legacy could evolve and thrive in the modern. But the contract wasn't just about business. It was a public declaration of unity between two families that had spent decades tearing each other down. The media had already dubbed it the alliance of the century, and the pressure to succeed was immense. Failure wasn't an option, not for their companies, their families, or their own reputations. As Victor and Elena prepared to embark on this forced collaboration, the weight of their family's history loomed over them. They weren't just fighting for a project, they were fighting to redefine what their families stood for. But neither of them could have predicted how deeply this partnership would challenge their beliefs, their ambitions, and their hearts. The first few days of Victor and Elena's forced partnership were nothing short of a battlefield. The ink on the contract had barely dried when the two found themselves at odds over nearly every aspect of the Utopia 2050 project. Their personalities, as different as night and day, clashed at every turn, making it clear that this so-called alliance was going to be anything but smooth. Victor Hale was a man of precision and control. His days were meticulously planned, his decisions calculated, and his demeanor unshakable. He thrived in the world of logic and data, where emotions were irrelevant and efficiency was king. To him, the Utopia 2050 project was a technological masterpiece waiting to be built, a city where AI would optimize every aspect of life, from transportation to energy consumption. He approached the project with the same cold, methodical mindset that had made Hale Innovations a global powerhouse. Elena Rivera, on the other hand, was a force of nature. Passionate, outspoken, and fiercely creative, she believed that cities were meant to be lived in, not just optimized. For her, Utopia 2050 wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a chance to create a community that prioritized people over machines. She envisioned parks, schools, and public spaces that fostered connection and belonging, not just efficiency. Her approach was bold and unconventional, often clashing with Victor's rigid adherence to logic. Their first official meeting as partners set the tone for what was to come. The project team had gathered in a sleek conference room, the walls lined with holographic displays showcasing preliminary designs for the smart city. Victor, as always, arrived precisely on time, his tablet in hand and his expression unreadable. Elena, true to form, swept in 5 minutes late, her energy filling the room as she greeted the team with a warm smile. "Let's get started," Victor said curtly, not bothering with pleasantries. He tapped his tablet, and a 3D model of the city appeared in the center of the room. "This is the initial layout for the transportation network. Fully automated, AI-driven, and designed for maximum efficiency." Elena leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Efficient, sure, but where's the human element? Where are the bike paths, the pedestrian-friendly zones, the green spaces?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a playground, Miss Rivera. It's a smart city. The goal is to minimize waste and maximize functionality." "And functionality doesn't include making it livable," Elena shot back. "People don't want to live in a machine, Victor. They want a city that feels alive, not one that's run by algorithms." The room fell silent as the tension between them crackled like electricity. The project team exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the two hash it out. Finally, Victor exhaled sharply and turned back to the hologram. "Fine," he said, his tone clipped. "We'll incorporate more green spaces, but the AI systems stay as they are, non-negotiable." Elena smirked. "Compromise? I didn't think you had it in you." Victor ignored the jab, already moving on to the next topic. But the exchange set the stage for what would become a pattern in their partnership. Constant push and pull, with neither willing to back down completely. Outside the conference room, their clashes continued. Victor's insistence on sticking to a rigid schedule drove Elena crazy, while her tendency to make last-minute changes to plans left him seething. One morning, she rearranged the agenda for a key stakeholder meeting without consulting him, prioritizing community engagement over technical presentations. Victor, blindsided, barely managed to keep his composure during the meeting. "Do you enjoy making my life difficult?" he demanded afterward, his voice low but laced with irritation. Elena raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to make your life easy, Victor. I'm here to make this project better, and if that means shaking things up, so be it." Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He couldn't deny that the stakeholders had responded positively to Elena's approach, even if it had thrown him off balance. Despite their constant bickering, there were moments when Victor couldn't help but be impressed by Elena's determination and creativity. During a brainstorming session on sustainable energy solutions, she proposed an innovative hybrid system that combined solar power with kinetic energy generated by pedestrian movement. The idea was bold, ambitious, and completely outside the box, and it worked. Even Victor had to admit that her vision brought something unique to the project. For her part, Elena began to see glimpses of the man behind Victor's cold exterior. Late one night, as they worked on finalizing a presentation, she caught him staring at a photo on his desk. A picture of him as a child, sitting on his grandfather's lap in the early days of Hale Innovations. When she asked about it, he hesitated before sharing a rare personal anecdote about how his grandfather had inspired his passion for technology. "That's why you're so obsessed with perfection," Elena said softly. "You're trying to live up to his legacy." Victor's expression hardened, and he quickly changed the subject. But the moment stayed with Elena, giving her a new perspective on the man she had written off as nothing more than a cold, calculating CEO. As the days turned into weeks, their dynamic began to shift. The clashes didn't stop. If anything, they became more intense. But there was a growing undercurrent of respect between them. Victor started to listen to Elena's ideas, even if he didn't always agree with them. Elena, in turn, began to appreciate Victor's meticulous attention to detail and his unwavering commitment to the project. Still, neither of them would admit it out loud. To the outside world, they were still the same bickering rivals, locked in a battle of wills. But beneath the surface, something was beginning to change, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. The early days of their partnership were a whirlwind of arguments, compromises, and unexpected moments of connection. It was messy, frustrating, and exhausting, but it was also the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. The turning point in Victor and Elena's partnership came when the Utopia 2050 project faced its first major crisis. Up until that moment, their clashes had been confined to the boardroom, where their arguments, though heated, were still manageable. But when an external threat jeopardized everything they had worked for, they were forced to confront not only the stakes of the project, but also their growing reliance on each other. It started with a leak. A confidential blueprint of the city's AI infrastructure was published online, sparking a media frenzy. The design, which showcased Hale Innovations' proprietary technology, was hailed as revolutionary, but also raised concerns about privacy and surveillance. Critics accused the project of prioritizing control over freedom, and the backlash was swift. Protesters gathered outside Hale Innovations' headquarters, demanding answers, while government officials began questioning whether the project should proceed at all. Victor was livid. The leak was a direct attack on his company's reputation, and he was determined to find the culprit. He spent hours in his office, poring over security logs and interrogating his team. Meanwhile, Elena was dealing with her own set of challenges. The Rivera name was being dragged into the controversy, with critics accusing her family of enabling a project that could potentially infringe on civil liberties. For the first time, the public skepticism about the Hale-Rivera alliance seemed justified. "This is a disaster," Victor said, pacing the length of the conference room during an emergency meeting. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by a rare display of frustration. "If we don't get ahead of this, the entire project could be scrapped." Elena, seated at the table, was uncharacteristically quiet. She had spent the morning fielding calls from government officials and community leaders, trying to reassure them that the project's intentions were noble. But the truth was, she wasn't sure how to fix this. "Have we identified the source of the leak?" she asked finally, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Victor shook his head. "Not yet. But I have my suspicions." Elena frowned. "Suspicions aren't enough, Victor. We need proof, and we need a plan to address the public's concerns." Victor stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Do you have a suggestion, or are you just here to point out the obvious?" Elena met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "We need to be transparent. Hold a press conference, release a statement, and show the public that we're taking their concerns seriously. Hiding behind closed doors will only make us look guilty." Victor's jaw tightened. He hated the idea of airing the project's dirty laundry in public, but he couldn't deny that Elena had a point. The longer they stayed silent, the worse the situation would become. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but we do it my way. No unnecessary details, no overpromising, just the facts." Elena nodded. "Agreed, but we also need to address the root of the problem. If there's a security breach in your system, we need to fix it fast." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Are you implying this is my fault?" "I'm implying that this is our responsibility," Elena shot back. "Whether you like it or not, we're in this together." The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the contract that had bound them to this partnership. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victor sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right," he said, "let's get to work." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Victor and his team worked around the clock to identify the source of the leak, while Elena spearheaded the effort to manage public relations. Despite their differences, they found themselves falling into an unexpected rhythm. Victor's analytical mind complemented Elena's emotional intelligence, and together they began to turn the tide. The press conference was a pivotal moment. Standing side by side on the stage, Victor and Elena presented a united front. Victor addressed the technical aspects of the leak, outlining the steps Hale Innovations was taking to strengthen security. Elena, meanwhile, spoke directly to the public, emphasizing the project's commitment to creating a city that balanced innovation with humanity. "We understand your concerns," she said, her voice steady and sincere, "and we want to assure you that this project is not just about technology, it's about people. Utopia 2050 is a vision for the future, but it's also a promise to prioritize the needs and rights of every individual who will call this city home." The response was cautiously optimistic. While some critics remained skeptical, many were impressed by the transparency and accountability displayed by the Hale-Rivera Alliance. The protests outside Hale Innovations began to dwindle, and the government reaffirmed its support for the project on the condition that additional safeguards were implemented to address privacy concerns. Behind the scenes, Victor and Elena continued to work tirelessly. The crisis had forced them to put aside their personal differences and focus on what truly mattered, saving the project. In the process, they began to see each other in a new light. One evening, as they reviewed the revised blueprints in Victor's office, Elena glanced at him and said, "You know, for someone who claims to hate working with me, you're surprisingly good at it." Victor looked up from his tablet, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "And for someone who insists on challenging me at every turn, you're not entirely unbearable." Elena laughed, the sound breaking through the tension that had hung over them for days. It was the first time they had shared a moment of levity since the crisis began, and it felt strangely natural. "Don't get used to it," she said, still smiling. "I'm not planning to make this easy for you." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Victor replied, his tone softer than usual. As the days turned into weeks, the crisis began to fade into the background, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Victor and Elena had weathered the storm together, and while their partnership was still far from perfect, it was stronger than it had been before. They had learned to trust each other, not completely, but enough to move forward. What neither of them realized, however, was that the crisis had done more than just strengthen their professional relationship. It had planted the seeds of something deeper, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. For now, they were content to focus on the project, unaware that their greatest challenge and their greatest revelation was still to come. As the Utopia 2050 project neared its final stages, the pressure on Victor and Elena reached an all-time high. The government's deadline loomed, and every decision carried the weight of their families' legacies, their companies' futures, and their own reputations. Despite the progress they had made as partners, the cracks in their relationship began to show. The unresolved tension between them, both professional and personal, threatened to undo everything they had built. The breaking point came during a critical design review meeting. The project team had gathered to finalize the city's energy grid, a key component that would determine the sustainability and efficiency of the entire smart city. Victor, as always, had prepared a meticulously detailed plan, relying on Hale Innovations' advanced AI systems to optimize energy distribution. Elena, however, had a different vision. "This plan is efficient, yes," Elena said, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the room. "But it's also inflexible. What happens if the AI fails? Or if the system needs to adapt to unforeseen circumstances? We need a backup plan, something that doesn't rely entirely on automation." Victor's expression darkened. "The AI won't fail. It's designed to anticipate and adapt to any scenario. Adding a redundant system would be a waste of resources." "It's not a waste if it ensures the city's resilience," Elena countered. "People need to know they can rely on more than just machines. This isn't just about technology, Victor. It's about trust." The room fell silent as the two locked eyes, the tension between them palpable. For a moment, it seemed as though Victor might concede, but then he shook his head. "We're not redesigning the entire energy grid because of hypothetical scenarios," he said coldly. "The plan stays as it is." Elena's jaw tightened, her frustration evident. "You're so focused on perfection that you can't see the bigger picture. This isn't just your project, Victor, it's ours. And I won't let you steamroll over my input." Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Then maybe you should focus on your area of expertise, Ms. Rivera, and leave the technology to me." The words hung in the air like a slap. Elena's eyes flashed with anger, but she didn't respond. Instead, she gathered her notes and left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The rest of the team sat in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. For the next few days, Victor and Elena barely spoke. Their once productive partnership devolved into icy professionalism, with each of them working in isolation. The project continued to move forward, but the spark that had driven their collaboration was gone. The team noticed the shift, but no one dared to address it. It wasn't until a late-night encounter in the office that the tension between them finally came to a head. Victor was in his office staring at the holographic model of the city when Elena walked in. She looked exhausted, her usually vibrant energy dimmed by the weight of their conflict. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Victor nodded, gesturing for her to sit. She didn't. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at him, her expression a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "This constant fighting, the power struggles, the egos, it's exhausting, and it's not helping the project." Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "I'm not the one who keeps challenging every decision I make." "Because your decisions affect more than just you," Elena shot back. "This project is supposed to be a partnership, but you treat it like it's your personal empire. Do you even realize how hard it is to work with you?" Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Elena took a deep breath, her voice softening. "Look, I know we're different. I know we don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But I also know that this project wouldn't be where it is without both of us. You push me to think differently, to be better, and I'd like to think I do the same for you." Victor's expression shifted, a flicker of something unspoken crossing his face. For a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "You do," he admitted quietly, "but that doesn't mean it's easy." Elena smiled faintly. "It's not supposed to be easy, Victor. Nothing worth doing ever is." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, they weren't adversaries or reluctant partners. They were just two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. "I'll add the backup system," Victor said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're right. It's not just about efficiency. It's about trust." Elena's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly recovered. "Thank you," she said, her tone sincere. Victor nodded, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to relax. The weight of their conflict began to lift, replaced by a newfound understanding. Over the next few weeks, their partnership transformed. The arguments didn't stop. If anything, they became more frequent, but they were no longer destructive. Instead, they became a way for Victor and Elena to challenge each other, to push the project to new heights. Their differences, once a source of conflict, became their greatest strength. But something else was changing too. The late nights and shared victories brought them closer in ways neither of them had anticipated. Victor found himself drawn to Elena's passion and resilience, while Elena began to see the man behind Victor's cold exterior, a man who cared deeply, even if he didn't always show it. The realization hit them both during a quiet moment on the construction site. They had been inspecting the progress on the city's central plaza, a sprawling space designed to serve as the heart of the community. As they stood side by side, watching the workers bring their vision to life, Elena turned to Victor. "Do you ever think about what happens after this?" she asked. Victor frowned. "After the project?" Elena nodded. "Yeah, when it's all done and we go back to our separate lives. Do you think we'll just go back to being rivals?" Victor was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the plaza. Finally he turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know that this project wouldn't have been possible without you." Elena smiled, her heart skipping a beat. "The feeling's mutual." For the first time, they allowed themselves to acknowledge the connection that had been building between them. It was fragile, unspoken, and complicated, but it was real. As the sun set over the construction site, casting the city in a warm golden light, Victor and Elena stood together, united not just by the project, but by something deeper. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for the first time, they were willing to face it together. The completion of the Utopia 2050 project was a moment of triumph, not just for Victor and Elena, but for everyone involved. The city, a perfect blend of cutting-edge technology and human-centered design, stood as a testament to what could be achieved when two opposing forces came together. But for Victor and Elena, the grand opening wasn't just the end of a project. It was the beginning of something far more personal. The night before the ceremony, Elena found herself unable to sleep. The weight of everything they had accomplished and everything that still remained unspoken between her and Victor kept her awake. She wandered through the city's central plaza, the heart of the community they had envisioned together. The fountain sparkled under the soft glow of the city lights, and the air was filled with a quiet stillness that felt almost magical. She didn't hear Victor approach until he was standing beside her. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Elena turned to him, surprised, but not entirely. Somehow she had known he would find her here. "No," she admitted. "I guess I just needed a moment to take it all in." Victor nodded, his gaze fixed on the fountain. "It's incredible, isn't it? Seeing it all come together like this." "It is," Elena said softly. "But it's not just the city. It's everything we've been through to get here. I don't think I've ever worked so hard for something in my life." Victor glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Neither have I," he said, "and I don't think I could have done it without you." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She had spent so much time convincing herself that their connection was purely professional, but hearing those words from Victor made it impossible to deny what she had been feeling all along. "Victor," she began, but he cut her off. "I immediately agreed. I mean it," he said, turning to face her fully. "You've challenged me in ways no one else ever has. You've made me see things differently, made me better, and I don't think I can go back to the way things were before." Elena felt a lump form in her throat. She had always prided herself on her independence, on her ability to stand on her own, but Victor had managed to break through the walls she had built around herself, and that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. "I feel the same way," she admitted. Her voice pushed me to be better, to think bigger. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as just a rival or a partner. You've become important to me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their unspoken feelings hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Then, slowly, Victor reached out and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, and reassuring. "I don't know what this is," he said, his voice soft, "but I know I don't want it to end." Elena smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Neither do I." The next day, the grand opening ceremony was a resounding success. The city's unveiling was met with widespread acclaim, with government officials praising the Halle Rivera Alliance as a model for future collaborations. Victor and Elena stood side by side on the stage, their speeches highlighting the importance of innovation, sustainability, and community. The media hailed them as visionaries, their partnership a testament to what could be achieved when two opposing forces came together. But for Victor and Elena, the ceremony was more than just a celebration of the project. It was the beginning of a new chapter. As they stood in the spotlight, surrounded by applause and admiration, they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. They had built something extraordinary together, and now they were ready to see where their journey would take them. That evening, after the ceremony, Victor invited Elena to dinner. It wasn't a formal business meeting or a celebratory event with their teams. It was just the two of them, alone for the first time since they had admitted their feelings. He chose a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, the perfect place to reflect on everything they had accomplished. As they sat across from each other, the city lights twinkling below, Elena couldn't help but feel a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in months. "It's beautiful," she said, gazing out at the skyline. "It is," Victor agreed, though his eyes were on her, not the view. "But I think the company makes it even better." Elena laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made Victor's chest tighten. "Are you trying to be charming, Victor Hale?" she teased. "Is it working?" he asked, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Maybe," she admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. "But don't let it go to your head." They talked for hours, their conversation flowing effortlessly. For the first time, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable, sharing stories about their childhoods, their families, and their dreams for the future. Victor told Elena about his grandfather, the man who had inspired his passion for technology, and Elena shared her memories of growing up on construction sites, watching her father bring his visions to life. As the night wore on, the distance that had once defined their relationship seemed to disappear entirely. They weren't rivals or reluctant partners anymore. They were just two people who had found something unexpected in each other. When the evening came to an end, Victor walked Elena to her car. The air was cool, and the city was quiet, the chaos of the day finally giving way to peace. As they stood there, neither of them seemed ready to say goodbye. "Thank you for tonight," Elena said, her voice soft. "I didn't realize how much I needed this." "Neither did I," Victor admitted. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Elena, I know this is new and I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to pretend that what we have isn't real." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "It is real," she said, "and I think we owe it to ourselves to see where it goes." Victor nodded, a rare look of relief crossing his face. "I couldn't agree more." Before she could say anything else, he leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, as though he was afraid of crossing a line, but when Elena responded, wrapping her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened. It was a moment of pure connection, a culmination of everything they had been through together. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his, a smile playing on her lips. "I guess this means we're not just business partners anymore," she said teasingly. Victor chuckled, his hands resting on her waist. "I think we've been more than that for a while now." In the weeks that followed, Victor and Elena began to navigate their new relationship. It wasn't easy. Their differences, while complementary, still led to the occasional argument. But they had learned to communicate, to listen, and to compromise. Their bond, forged in the crucible of the Utopia 2050 project, was stronger than ever. Their families, initially skeptical of their partnership, eventually came to accept and even support their relationship. The Hale and Rivera dynasties, once bitter rivals, found common ground in the success of the project and the happiness of their heirs. For the first time in decades, the animosity between the two families began to fade, replaced by a sense of mutual respect. As for the city itself, Utopia 2050 became a shining example of what was possible when innovation and humanity were balanced. The AI systems worked seamlessly alongside the community-focused design, creating a space that was both efficient and livable. It wasn't perfect, no city ever was, but it was a step toward a brighter future. For Victor and Elena, the city was more than just a project. It was a symbol of their journey, their struggles, and their triumphs. It was a reminder that even the most unlikely partnerships could lead to something extraordinary. And as they stood together in the central plaza one evening, watching the city come alive with the laughter of children and the hum of activity, they knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning.